Today I'm going to be talking with Dr. Debbie Pusher from the University of Saskatchewan in Canada. She's going to be sharing with me some insights into parent knowledge and how this impacts your teaching practice and how it impacts student learning and wellbeing outcomes. I'm sure you'll agree. Hi, Debbie.
Hello, Rachel. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks.
You look
Okay,
lovely.
oh, thank you. Do I have glare though on the screen, do you think?
I can't see any glare.
Oh, okay, good. Maybe I'll just turn this light, see if that does it make any difference, I wonder?
Oh, yes, I think I did see something, but I can't see it now. There's a slight haze. I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah, it's probably the way these lights are shining. So, yeah, just so it doesn't get in the way, I can. Oops, that's a bit dark. What's that like, Rachel?
That's a bit better. It's very faint anyway, so.
It doesn't, and is that too dark now, though?
No, that's okay. I can see your face clearly. Can you see
Okay.
my face clearly?
Yes, you look great. I can see you. As you're putting on summer clothes and we're putting on winter clothes, I guess. Hey.
Yeah, it's not quite summer here yet. It's still
Yeah.
spring, so it's a beautiful time of the year. I went for a walk this morning and all the blossoms are out and it's just beautiful. It's really nice weather at this time. It's not too hot.
So what's your temperature then, Rachel, approximately?
It's been about 25 this week.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, between 20 and 25, so it's perfect.
Gorgeous. Yeah. And then with everything blooming, it's even better. So.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, good, good.
And
well,
how was your trip?
Crazy windy here today. So any fall leaves are long gone.
Oh, really?
Yes. And our temperatures have been freezing at night.
Yeah.
-5, -6. So.
Oh, really? That is freezing.
Yeah. We're just getting to the point where snow will come soon.
Oh, no. We actually had snow not far from Melbourne a few weeks ago, which was very weird, very strange for this time of the year.
Oh, wow. That is a weird time.
Yeah, snowing, and then about 3 days later it was about 28 degrees. So it was very strange.
Figure that out. Hey?
Yeah. Very, very unusual.
Yeah.
And how was your trip to see your dad?
Oh, so good, Rachel. So good to see him.
Yeah.
He had been here for his birthday in the middle of December, but then, we hadn't had another vacation period to get up to see him again. And then COVID hit, right?
Yeah.
So it was like 10 months. It felt like a long time. So
yeah, that is a long time.
Yeah, I talk to him every week, but it isn't the same as, being together. And yeah. So, yeah, it was awesome. We both cried when I had to go. It was hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw my mum for the first time this week. I don't think I've seen her since June. Yeah, so it was nice to see her.
Nice. And is she doing well, Rachel?
She's going okay, but she's got to have an operation on her shoulder. So,
okay.
Yeah, so that's not good, but it'll be a bit better for her. Yeah. She's in a bit of pain
now, right?
Yeah. So she's just got to have that done. I'm not sure when, because we're still in lockdown, so we just have to wait and see. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We had a lot of surgeries postponed because of COVID as well.
Yeah.
They were kind of reserving hospitals for COVID patients and so on. And so it really backed up knees, hips, shoulders, things like that. So
yeah,
it's kind of created a logjam right now that folks are trying to figure out. But
yeah,
it's hard.
And your schools still, are they on a break or are they back?
We're back. So we came back. We usually come back early September, came back more like middle of September, just a little bit later. And parents were given a choice to send their children face-to-face into school or continue with remote learning.
Okay, that's nice that they had the choice.
Yeah, and so what happened is any teachers maybe a teacher had health compromised in some way, or had children, or caring for, family or something. So they designated those teachers as remote teaching, and then anyone who was able to return into classrooms did.
Yeah.
So there was a little bit of flexibility for teachers too, which I think is important, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, we had a Catholic school close 2 days ago. There'd been a couple of incidents of COVID, and they weren't sure of the contact tracing because they were individuals who'd been in multiple places in the school. So they've closed it till the contact tracing is all done, and they're doing a really thorough cleaning. So things are still quite tentative, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it doesn't seem like it's going to end anytime soon until there's a vaccine. So I think we just have to learn to live with it,
yeah.
which we've been trying to do.
Yeah, in my department meeting this morning, there was talk of that, people saying they were looking forward to getting back to face-to-face learning in September, and others saying, I think you're being optimistic, that we'll continue with hybrid models until there is a vaccine, right? And those of us that don't have to be in a lab or a dental clinic or won't be on campus, right? So,
Yes. Certainly been a different year for everybody.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
But it's not even a learning curve, it's a learning spike, right?
Yes, a forced learning.
Yeah, forced learning is right, for better or worse. Yeah.
So we're here today to talk about parent knowledge and the impact of parent knowledge on teaching practice and on student learning and wellbeing. So I'm going to be asking you a few questions, but we'll just talk in conversation style so that we can just, whatever comes up, we just go with the flow. But I do have some questions that I'll probably pop in every now and then anyway, and we'll see how we go. But mostly the purpose of this conversation is for teachers, the audience is teachers, to help them understand the power of parent knowledge for their teaching practice and what actually works in practice, and how to go about actually gaining parent knowledge from parents. How do they invite them into the conversation? So my first question is, I guess we should start with the definition of parent knowledge and what the use of the word parent means and what the actual knowledge is that parents hold.
Nice. That's such an important question because, as you know, Rachel, so much of the field has gone to using the term family engagement. And I've stayed with the term parent engagement or parent and family engagement because I believe that role in a family played by a parent is really significant. And so for me, I guess I think about that word more as a role and as an act, an action, rather than that person. So we know that in a family, some people have more of a caregiving role and some are more care receiving. And so parent names that role and the acts that correspond with caregiving. And that could be a biological mother or father, could be grandparents, aunties, uncles. When families join, a partner might join with another individual who has children already. They too are a parent then. So I guess I think about in schools, we never talk about schools without talking about teachers because we know the role of teacher is really significant. And so I guess I continue to feel, then how do we talk about family without talking about parents? And I think back to my relationship with school as a parent. There were lots of times the school wanted me or my partner Lori to come. Another brother wouldn't have done it, right? So in our family, there's 2 of us who are parents and 3 children. So parent-teacher conferences, it needed to be a parent. Signing a report card, a parent. An injury, an issue at school, a parent. And so I think it's really important that we don't wash away that role, that we continue to foreground it, but just broaden the definition, make the definition more inclusive, and begin to use it in bigger kinds of ways.
And sometimes parents can tend to be put in a specific category as well. The term parent is used often as to describe all parents, but we know that there's such a diverse, as you mentioned, diverse range of parents and family situations. And it's also about the behavior of parents and what they bring to their children's learning and what they bring to their family. And it can never be generalized, because every family context is different, and every individual is different.
And I mean, I know people try all the time to come up with a better word, and I love your word carers in Australia. I think that captures that role quite well. But guardians, I'm not a guardian of my child, right? In that clinical, legal kind of sense, or, I've heard people saying your significant person, or, that kind of thing. But to me, it just, that could be my neighbor next door. That could be my post person. You know what I mean?
Yes.
There is something specific, and we're kind of avoiding talking about it in the sake of being inclusive. And I think so, rather than worrying about that, let's broaden our definition, right?
Yeah, definitely.
There's many words in history that had one meaning that got redefined or used in new ways. And I think we can do that work to broaden what we mean when we say parent. And especially if we think about it as a verb or as a role, I think it's more inclusive too. So,
yeah. So can you share a little bit about your work, Debbie, with pre-service teachers and with teachers, and your research into parent knowledge?
Well, the research into parent knowledge started way back when I did my doctoral work. I was doing my dissertation on the positioning of parents on school landscapes, or in relation to school landscapes. And in my writing, I began to use this term parent knowledge. And my supervisor would say to me, Debbie, what is parent knowledge? Like, how is parent knowledge held and used? How can you talk about this when it hasn't really been conceptualized? And so after I finished my dissertation, I applied for grant funding in order to do exactly that, to define it. What is parent knowledge? How is it held in and used by parents? And so that study involved living alongside 3 families for about 3 years, spending time with all of them, and just learning who they were, what they did, what they knew, how they used what they knew, how what they knew influenced decisions and so on that they were making. And also how it interacted with their relationship with their children's teachers and schooling as well. So it was really through that work that I felt that I could begin to define it. I knew what it was. I could begin to talk about it. And that led then to the opportunity when I work with teachers, whether they're pre-service teachers or in service, to begin to say, we know we can identify your knowledge as teachers. How do we do that parallel work and identify parents' knowledge, not replacing yours with theirs, but recognizing each one is distinct and important, and they're both ways of knowing a child, or ways of knowing teaching and learning. So it came to be in that regard. And so we really tried to explore, well, what is parent knowledge? What does it look like? How do we gather it? Then moving to how do we use it alongside our own in classrooms? And we began at that point then to talk about a pedagogy of walking alongside. So how is parent knowledge a process of putting teacher knowledge alongside parent knowledge and moving them both forward in understanding kids? So just as sort of a quick capturing of that process, I guess, Rachel.
I love the way that you describe it as walking alongside, because often in the past, and we've talked about this before, in terms of the relationship between parents and teachers has often been a bit of an us and them scenario, whereas the walking alongside indicates that you both have a role to play, or you each have a role to play, including the student, to actually support the child at the centre. And that walking alongside really captures that the essence of the relationship and the relationship we aspire to have with each other to support the child's learning.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, historically, our schools have been very hierarchical, right? You know, we have to be honest about that. Teachers claim that ground called school, administrators, and we define the policies, the practices, the entry and exit times. Everything was decided and then communicated to parents. So I think back to, you know, when I was a child, my mom rarely would have been at my school. My dad probably never, unless he was picking me up for a dental appointment or something, right? And it was very much considered off limits to parents. So there was that hierarchical piece. So we're really trying to equalize that, right? To recognize that the parent knowledge has a really significant place and offers something really rich if we dig into it and take the time to explore it. I know there's sometimes concern that we're turning the hierarchy upside down. Now parents are going to tell us what to do, or parents are going to make decisions that we should make as professionals. That is not at all what I'm talking about, right? We want the very best, most qualified, most well-educated, skilled teachers in our classrooms we possibly can. We're just saying there's another piece that's been missing. How do we put those knowledges side by side?
Yeah. So in terms of the effective ways to reach parents to gather their parent knowledge, a lot of the questions I receive from teachers and from school principals is, how do we reach those parents that we never see, or in larger schools, for example, in rural or regional areas where parents never come to the school because their children catch the bus to school. They might come to parent-teacher interviews, or they're completely disconnected from the school community. And often I get asked, how do we actually reach those parents to actually engage them and to understand their families? So can you share a little bit of an insight into how this happens in Canada?
Sure. I often joke about this, so excuse me if anyone finds it offensive, but I always say our parents aren't hard to reach because we know where they live. We can go there. We can walk there, we can drive there, whatever it takes to get there. And so I guess when I say that, what I'm saying is the first responsibility is ours, right? So when they're feeling disengaged, disenfranchised, marginalized, removed, that work is our work. We're the ones in those paid professional positions, so it's our responsibility to reach out to them. So we can stay on our school landscapes and wait for them to come. It isn't going to happen, right? It would be if it was going to. It would be happening already. So what do we do to go to them? And so we've been doing things. Some of our teachers will do the home visits and really spend time with every family. Others aren't as comfortable yet with that, so they may do what we call a drop-by. They may just visit on the doorstep, have a small conversation. Depending again on the geographics, we've done things like community canvassing. So a school staff will divide into teams. They look at all of the families who will be with them that year, divide up the list, and off they go, and they go to every home and they welcome the families to a new school year. They introduce themselves. They ask if they have any questions about the year. They give them contact information, usually a little treat of some kind, maybe a lolly bag, or maybe, you know, just something welcoming, and they make that contact. It's low risk for both sides. It's not threatening, but it's just saying, I care about you, and I care about you enough to come to your door and say hello and see if you have everything everything that you need. Other things we're doing is sometimes we're working in the community in which we don't live ourselves, so we may not know that community. So if there's high Indigenous population or newcomers from other countries, that may be in contrast to a teacher's experience. So then we'll do just a community walk, walking through the community, introducing ourselves, looking at what businesses are there, what services are there, what access is like for families. Oh, there's a halal grocery store, et cetera, so that we're becoming just more knowing in order to reach out and make those relationships. Lots of phone calls if we can reach by phone, texts, software apps like Seesaw, social media, again, depending on your community and what access they have. But it's designating time and saying this is a priority. This is important for us, and we're all going to do it. But I think it takes some professional development sometimes on the part of teachers to know how to do that, to feel comfortable, to know what to say. So that professional development, the practice phone calls, in staff meetings ahead of time, all of those kinds of things, so that people feel confident, and having people go with support so that, again, they feel less at risk or less vulnerable than they might if they were on their own.
And I guess in terms of organising home visits and approaching families, it really needs to be a whole school approach. Is it often led by the principal, or do teachers take their own initiative in some schools just to reach out to families? I know I've spoken with several teachers in workshops about starting in your own classroom. So you have the opportunity to create a culture of family engagement in your own classroom by initiating these types of strategies and reaching out to parents in a way that perhaps the teacher next door is not doing, but you can lead by example. Is that often what happens in schools, or is it mostly led by principals?
I would love to tell you it's led by principals, but that isn't actually the case. In Saskatchewan, pre-kindergarten teachers, so those are teachers of children who are 3 and 4 years of age, have a mandate to do a home visit. So it's part of the expectation of our Ministry of Education that they'll do 3 home visits during a year with all of their children, and they're given time to do it, which is really important as well. And so in some schools, it might be only the pre-kindergarten teacher who's doing the home visiting. In other schools or school divisions, they've given time and made it a mandate for both pre-kindergarten and kindergarten. So those are now 5-year-old children to have home visits. And then we have teachers who love the idea and have taken it up, and they do it regardless of the age of kids they teach, it regardless of the school or the community they're in. So I think about a school, it's an upper middle class neighborhood with many diverse families, many parents who are working at the university or doing PhDs at the university from other countries in the world. And Kirsten and Ryan were just really excited about doing home visits, decided as grade 1 teachers that this was going to be their practice. And when they first presented the idea to their parents, the parents said, why do you think you need to visit our homes? Because there's this sort of stigma that a home visit means something's wrong, right? And so they renamed them and said, we want to come and learn from your household knowledge. Every family is filled with knowledge, and if we'd had an opportunity to visit and learn from you, we could bring that into our curriculum. So that became a practice that they established, and it's been happening there ever since. So it really depends, right, on the principal's comfort level, whether they allow teachers to do it or not. It depends on the teacher's commitment, because in lots of instances they're not given time to do it, so they do it on their own family time or personal time. So there's quite a range. I would say that there is also a need for, teacher education, professional education for principals on parent engagement, on parent knowledge, on home visiting, because they tend to get worried about things like safety and liability and get concerned about some of those other things that fall in their mandate rather than that actual knowledge exchange that happens in a home visit.
Quite amazing and quite an achievement to have that mandated in kindergartens and schools. I'm wondering if parents are aware of that mandate when they enrol their children, or does the school need to reach out and invite them to, or invite themselves to into their homes? I'm just wondering how parents react. You mentioned that they react a little bit hesitantly in having the teachers come into their home, and I can imagine some parents might feel a little threatened by that. And teachers also a little nervous about approaching parents for a home visit. I guess understanding how to approach parents to help them understand the purpose of it. How would teachers go about doing that?
I think that's absolutely the critical piece, Rachel. What's the why? Why are you coming? What are you going to do while you're here? What's the purpose? What are our takeaways going to be? I think it's really critical that that can be articulated well to families. And once they understand that it's just a visit, and I want to know you, I want to know your hopes and dreams for your child, I want to know the kinds of things that you do with as a family or with your child when he or she isn't in school. I want to know what your expectations of me are as your child's teacher this year. So I'm really just coming to listen and to learn, to hear your stories. And I think when parents know you aren't recording, you aren't taking notes, you don't have paperwork that you're keeping, that you're really just coming for a visit, that changes everything. And I think that kids' excitement about it changes everything as well. That idea that my teacher's going to come to my house and meet my dog or see my bedroom or my stuffy, that is huge. And so often that upswell comes from the children's own excitement. Yeah. And I see real difference between how our different groups of parents respond. So our Indigenous families, our newcomer families are thrilled. They're honored. They're thrilled to have their teacher in their house. And it's just a really big occasion, and often many family members are there to greet the teacher. Our mainstream Canadian families less comfortable with it. Sometimes what I hear is, well, Rachel, why would you come to my house? I mean, we're really so much alike. What would you possibly learn from visiting me? And then there's this crazy urge to bake and vacuum and make sure my house is perfect, right? Which also puts parents off.
So there's no judgment if my house is messy.
Exactly. And so one of the things that I think, we want to say to them is every family, every home has a home culture, right? It doesn't matter whether we're both of the same ethnicity, or we're both of the same religion, or we both live in the same geographic region of the city. Your family will have its little rituals and ways of doing things and family stories and practices that won't be like mine at all. And so when I'm in your home, even though we may seem like we're similar, we start to see all of those beautiful particular things that make a family unique and special. And that I think it just takes a couple of times for a teacher to do that, to recognize how much they learned, how much they thought they knew, but then how much they learned that they didn't know at all. So,
and when it comes, sorry.
No, not at all. Yeah.
When it comes to having those conversations with families, what sort of parent knowledge are teachers seeking when they either have a home visit, or if, for example, the first time they meet families is for the first conversation of the year. I know in some schools in Australia we have parent-teacher conversations at the start of the year for that purpose, to get to know the family. What sort of parent knowledge should teachers be seeking during those opportunities, and how can they seize those opportunities to learn more about the child and the family context? And my next question will be around how that actually impacts their teaching. So the first question really is, what parent knowledge are they seeking? And how can they make the most of those opportunities?
Yeah. I'm not sure if they're seeking like very specific things, but really being wide open to what they might hear or learn. Again, not knowing what you're going to hear, what stories the family will tell. So the general questions are often, tell me about your own schooling experience. Talk to me about when you were in school, right? And again, we learn so much about how a parent perceives school, their sense of comfort, safety, all kinds of things come out in that. Often when a parent is really protective of their child, it's because they had a bad experience at school themselves and they're trying to shield their own child from that. But we don't know that if we haven't heard their own story. So sometimes it's things like that. I think when we ask parents what their hopes and dreams are for their children, it tells us a lot about who they are, what they value, the kinds of things that they do at home. So in our book, Living as Map Makers, I wrote about Red, one of the parents in the Parent Knowledge Study. And he talked about how he wanted so much for his kids to be proud they were brown. They're an Indigenous family. And so his hopes and dreams that they'd walk proudly at school, that they wouldn't apologize for being Indigenous, that they wouldn't pretend they weren't Indigenous, that they would talk about going to sweat lodge ceremonies and participating in powwows and feasts and so on. So when I think about then me as a teacher knowing that hope and dream, and I think about my curriculum, I can see so many places to honor Indigenous ways of knowing, to ensure I have literature in my classroom library that reflects Cree culture, which is the Indigenous group they are with. That I bring elders in to speak, that that the kinds of extracurricular opportunities I offer are related to cultural pieces and so on, right? So I think those hopes and dreams often give us really good insight into some of the bigger values and some of the bigger visions that families have for their child. When we talk to them about what do you do when you're not in school, that's always so fun. So many things come up. Their passion about, about sports or music or dance or culture. The fact that they go to church or a synagogue or a mosque. So many things start to come out in that experience. And kids often want to show, especially the little kids, want to show their teacher their home. And, teachers have learned that the pantry and the kitchen isn't being used for food, but it's what the family calls a prayer closet, right? And it was a Hindu family, and they had their gods and their candles and their prayer mat, and they used that as a place to pray. How would a teacher know that otherwise, right? So those kinds of things come through the language spoken in home, right? Whether there's intergenerational relationships in the home or whether it's a more nuclear family, all of that again shapes how parents think about their kids and what they're wanting. So it's in the safety of the home that often parents will tell the stories they may not tell you otherwise. I'm really worried about. I've been wondering about my daughter's speech. I think it's lagging, or is that lisp going to go away, or is that normal for right now, or should I be worried about it? With our little kids, my child has been wetting the bed since school started. You know, all those things that could be academic, social, emotional, spiritual, physical, that feel safe to talk about when you're in your own home, in a safe place, in a quiet environment. You're not rushed and pushed. That's where I find parents share what they know, and they ask questions about what they hope you'll help them with as well.
So it really takes a lot of self-awareness of teachers to be able to really listen to what is being said and really understanding, reading between the lines, and really seeing the values that families hold and what's most important to them, and then transferring that knowledge into I guess a sense of sensitivity in how they use that knowledge, and how they talk with the child at school about their traditions, how they bring that into the school environment. Can you share some examples of how teachers have taken that knowledge and really, you shared some examples before of the Family of Red and bringing those books, the Indigenous books, into the library and sharing different aspects of culture. Can you share some other examples of how teachers have approached gaining that knowledge and really utilising it in their everyday teaching practice, and how they actually interact with that family after the home visit?
And sometimes it's just something very small that they will have learned during the home visit. I'm thinking about Janique. She is a pre-K teacher, and she was meeting with a mom of a special needs child entering the school system for the first time, a fairly high needs special needs student. And so of course the mom had all kinds of worries and things. And one of the things she said is sometimes she just melts down. She just loses it and she cries. And so they were talking about it, and Janique had said to her, so what do you do when that happens? So you've had experience with this. What advice do you have for me? And the mom sort of giggled and said, well, what we've learned works is we just start singing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. We don't do anything, we just sing, and she soothes, and she just joins back into things again. So early in the school year, Janique's got kids in the circle, they're on the carpet, and this little one, something happened and it set her off, and she went into this state. And so Janique thought, okay, here we go. So she sang Twinkle, Twinkle. And the little girl was just, it was that soothing that she needed, and just that response that Janique knew that too. And as the school year unfolded, the kids just picked up on it. Nothing was said, but they knew when this little one was struggling that the thing to do was to sing. And Janique said there were times the whole class would just sing.
Oh, and how beautiful.
Isn't that beautiful? How do you know, Rachel? How would you as a teacher ever know what to do? How many days, weeks, etc. would you be working to solve that issue?
And getting more and more stressed over trying to figure it out on your own.
Yeah. So that's just a little example. Kirsten, I'll use that example a lot. She's just amazing with parent engagement. She begins her year in grade 1 with she uses lots of big ideas and inquiry kinds of processes in her classroom. And that's a beautiful way to give parents lots of room to share knowledge. And so she often starts her year with a big idea that math lives everywhere. And so she asks the kids to think about, where does math live in their home and where does math live in their culture? And she talks to families about it as well. And so, and she knows things from having been in their homes. That beautiful tablecloth, that's a math pattern. And so, she has that insight of all of those things. And so families start bringing things in, sending things in, coming in to teach games from their own culture. It just the parents just naturally begin to feed into the curriculum making that's happening in the classroom, because it's an authentic and meaningful way for them to engage, to look for patterns in their clothing, to look for, numeracy, or, addition or subtraction, or, those kinds of problem solving games and so on. And so some teachers have it enter in those very big ways, just by always asking families. In Kirsten's room, whenever they begin a new inquiry, she always says, well, we need to ask our experts. So when we're thinking about this big idea, and we're gathering ideas, and we're thinking about, we have to ask our experts. So please go home and ask your family experts for ideas and so on. And so it just becomes natural for that to happen. Other teachers are doing some beautiful things to start the school year at various times during the year. Family evenings, family gatherings, that kind of thing. We've done things where we've asked, maybe we've introduced a storybook like The Memory Box by Mary Barr, or I always use Wilfred Gordon MacDonald Partridge when I speak in Australia, because Mem Fox wrote that beautiful book. And those stories set up the opportunity for families to gather artifacts that say who they are. And it's being done virtually differently now, because it's in breakout rooms on Zoom or something. But when we were together, families would gather at a table, maybe 3 families sitting together at this table, 3 families at that one, and they'd share their artifacts and tell who they are and where they come from, things that are important to them. So not only is the teacher hearing and gaining knowledge of the families, but families are gaining knowledge of one another, creating a greater web and more interconnections and more support for one another as well. So lots of those kinds of things. Christy, we have a beautiful book here in the Prairies. It's called If You're Not From the Prairies. So it's a very Western Canadian book written by a Métis author, and it says, if you're not from the prairies, you don't know the wind, you can't know the wind, the wind that howls, and, all that kind of thing. And so Christy does a beautiful project with her families. If you're not from my family, you can't know our laughter. You just won't know our laughter. Those kinds of things. And so the family stories provide insight into parent knowledge, but they also become curriculum in and of themselves for the kids and the families in the classroom, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And that's a beautiful example of a teacher really thinking about how she plans her curriculum and pedagogy in terms of how she delivers it. And I love the way she engages the students to talk with their parents. And I think that's another missing piece in some ways with parent engagement, where we don't need to necessarily rely on just teachers talking with parents. It's about helping students or the children understand that their parents are valued, and that they're valued partners in the learning, and that they have expertise that they can share with their children. And sometimes it takes the initiative from teachers to actually explore questions they can ask their parents, for them to open up and talk and tell stories to their children about their own lives and their history. And I know a lot of assignments that come home from school are around interviewing a family member to find out what their history is, or ultimately it comes back to storytelling, doesn't it? And
it does, so much of it. Brett Rowland is a high school department head, a high school English teacher here just in a city outside of Saskatoon, where I live. And I just think it's brilliant what he's done, because he has parents engaged in his high school English curriculum, which most teachers would tell you that's impossible, right? But Brett, instead of having students in his classes in grade 10 or 11 or 12 do novel studies, he's having parent teen book clubs with the kids. So he shows them the 5 novels, you know, that are aligned to the curriculum. These are novel choices. He makes sure there's choices in there that reflect or mirror the families in his community, so people could see themselves perhaps in one of those pieces of work. He sends information home with the kids and to their parents that says, here are the choices, invites them to choose a novel together. And then their first, he calls them check-ins. Their first check-in is they each say why they picked that book. And so the reason the father chose the book might be a different reason than the daughter chose the book. But they just sit like we are, a little video, and they record their conversation and they shoot that in to Brett. Why did we choose this book? What does it mean to me? Why am I interested in this? And then they plan a schedule. How are we going to read? Are we going to read together, separately? Are we going to check in every day, once a week? They get to plan all of that. And then he has these wonderful assignments. So that it's really very much the parents and students' experience. Brett's way out of it, right? He isn't in the midst of it at all. So things like each independently choose a passage in the book that speaks to your family's values. So find something that you think resonates. That's what we believe as a family too. And maybe find something that doesn't, that challenges your values, and then get together and talk about that. And it's amazing to hear the parents and their kids talk about what happens in those moments. I was talking to a mom and her son one evening, and she said, they picked her son, they decided to pick A Brave New World. And she said, there's some things in there that are quite mature, some things that we hadn't yet been talking about, moral choices around sexuality and different things. And she said, it was such a wonderful opportunity to have that conversation arise naturally. And for me to have the opportunity to sit with my son and say, we believe these things because, we do have strong religious values, and here's why, and here's what we're hoping will happen for you and your siblings with this. And then the son saying to me, I'm not so resistant about some of my family's rules anymore. I understand where they're coming from, and I get it. And I want to live that way in the world too. I want to be a certain kind of person. And so I'm not feeling anymore that it's just a rule. I understand more about my mom and dad's choices. Really cool things like that happened in that exchange. Another one that I love, Brett gave them the opportunity to choose a metaphor, a theme, something in the book that just spoke to them. And then they could work with it as a family in any way they wanted, artistically and writing and music, whatever worked for them. He said, if you're storytellers and you're oral, just video something, whatever. And he shared one piece with me one day. It came in and he said, I've got to send this to you. And the family also, I think, was reading Brave New World, and we're talking about the sense of being who you want to be, not giving into the pressures and things. So they chose the song, I Love You Just the Way You Are. And the son played the song on the piano, the student in Brett's class. The dad played, it's a cultural drum, I'm not sure, Django maybe it was called, and the mom sang. And they recorded this beautiful piece. Here they have this teenager, and they're creating this piece of music and filming it to send to their teacher. I just was so moved when I saw it, and I just think that is a memory that will never be forgotten. That will be a moment that will never be forgotten. And then just by coincidence, I was teaching classes this summer, and I was talking about Brett's work. And a teacher in the class said, I need to turn my mic on. And she said, Debbie, my son has been in Brett's class. I've been a parent on the receiving end of the parent-student book club. And she said, it's changed my relationship with my son in such dramatic ways. And she spoke about it really emotionally. And then in our class, we were doing book clubs. And her son was saying to her, "Oh, Mom, what are you reading? I've read that book too." And she said that this is now family culture, home culture, this sharing books, talking about books. It's just become what they do now. And it wasn't something they were doing before. So that power of parent-child, yes, Rachel, you're so right about that. And it doesn't always have to have the teacher in the middle or at the center, I think.
And what an amazing opportunity to be able to spend time with your child and truly engage in their learning. I would have loved that opportunity with my kids in secondary school, because I often tried to read the books that they were reading and to engage in conversations with them about it. But there was often some resistance, as there is with teenagers. But having the opportunity that's initiated by the teacher, where it is part of what they need to do, such a great opportunity to share and to understand the family values as well. And just on that topic too, I know you've talked a little bit in the past about when the teacher's values may be different to the family values, and how teachers manage their own perceptions of families in relating to them if they're completely different, from a completely different background. How do they overcome those feelings of perhaps judgment or perceiving a family a certain way? How would you describe a process they can go through to be aware of those perceptions and to not pass judgment, or to not have that interfere with their relationship with the family and with the student?
Yeah. I believe so strongly, Rachel, it's about experiential learning in that place, that they need to be in a place to experience something different, so that then they can see something they haven't had a chance to see. So as an example, one of the things that we do in my classes is we'll often work a shift at a community clinic in an evening, in an inner city part of the community, where people need healthcare services and maybe don't have access to them in the same way. And one summer, it was a really hot day for us in Canada, and it was evening, and some of the clients were coming in just to get a drink of cold water or just to cool down for a little bit. And this one woman came in, and she was sitting by one of our students, by Carrie, and they were chatting, and they both had children and so on. It was very obvious that this woman was working on the streets. That's what she was doing, right? The way she was dressed and all of that. And so Carrie was a little, trying to really have this conversation, find things in common, but lots of thoughts running in her head about this woman, right? So then the mom said, excuse me for a second. She took out her phone and she said, "I just need to tuck my kids into bed." And so she picked up her phone and she FaceTimed her children. She checked to make sure they were all home. She asked if they had their PJs on. She was asking whether they brushed their teeth. Is the door locked? All the things that you do, that I do with our children. I'm going to cry. And she was a mom full of love, who was doing the very best she could to provide a home, to keep her children with her, to feed them, to keep them safe. It was the only option in that moment of time that she had. That was life-changing for Carrie, and it was life-changing for all of us who were there with Carrie, right? As we debriefed that, and Carrie cried and said, if I was going to lose my children, if I was going to be homeless, if I had no food, would I too be walking that street if I had no other backup plan, if I had nothing else I could do? And how can any one of us say that we wouldn't be in that same place if we were living her life in those circumstances? So I think what we need is we need our teachers to become uncomfortable by having contact. So we work a shift at the clinic. We eat at the Friendship Inn, which for us would be, I guess you could call it a soup kitchen. We take our tray, we line up as a guest. We don't get to be behind the counters or in the safe places. We get our food like everyone. We walk in and I say to them, you can't sit with people from our class, so find a spot and begin a conversation side by side. And we hear amazing stories about things that have happened for people that have put them in the place they're in at this point in time. But we hear their laughter, we hear their love for their family, we look at pictures of family members, their plans for when they're going to get together again, etc., right? We have people speak, moms who've been incarcerated. We have ex-gang members speak to us. Because we're judgmental, we're also afraid, and it's because we don't know. We don't know the story, we haven't lived in that world, but as soon as we get close together, it changes, Rachel. It changes, and we're all of us humbled. You know, we're just open to seeing things we couldn't see before. And so in my work, I talk about it as being a move from looking outward to looking inward. So I can see you, you are poor, you didn't get your homework book signed, your kids' clothes are dirty, gosh, they don't have a lunch again today. And I can blame you, shame you, judge you, and keep the distance between us so large. Or I can look at myself and look in my heart and say, what must it be like as a parent to have to send my kids to school knowing they don't have a lunch to eat that day? What is it like for me to not have a washer or dryer or money to pay for a washer or dryer at a laundromat and have to send my kids to school with dirty clothes? Because they know that's what they're doing. It's not like they're oblivious. They don't have options and choices sometimes. So when we start to live in their world and see who they are through their own eyes, that's when I think we start asking really hard questions about who we are instead of who they are. And we look in our heart and we look in our mind and we say, the change is going to happen right here. What is it I have to do differently? What is it I could do that I'm not doing? You know, where does the change really need to occur? And how do I welcome my heart and my classroom to that child and that parent and that family just the same way I open it to the others? I don't know any other way though, except putting them face to face with it and mentoring it, coaching it, right? Like all along with that, right?
It's really about recognizing and embracing when those opportunities arise or when those things happen. It's a growth period for you as a person. What can I learn from this about myself mostly, and my reaction to it? Yeah, and all of those sorts of things that come up at the time, and perhaps it's confronting. But whenever we're confronted with something like that, it is always an opportunity to learn from. And as teachers are asking students to do the same thing, to push themselves, to go outside their comfort zone, to persist and to be resilient. And as adults, we need to be the same.
Yeah, I think it's so true. And what happens often is there's lots of tears. And we have to recognize that tears are healthy. It's a good sign. It's not a sign of weakness, and it's not a sign that we shouldn't have done this activity. It's part of that process. So there's some grieving when you realize you've been living in the world differently than you want to. And there's some guilt sometimes too. And I think we just have to talk about that as well. You know, Maya Angelou said, when we know better, we do better. And I think that's what we just have to say, is that was the past me. That's what I knew. That's all I knew. I didn't realize, but now I do. So now I'm going to live differently. But I think, this work means that we do have to attend to some of those emotions and some of those feelings and support people as they come to terms with a self they don't always like, or all parts of it, right? So I think I haven't learned any other way to do it. I believe it's the way that makes a difference. And I think we just have to have all the supports in place as we do it to keep people healthy and healing. Yeah.
And I guess that's the other question too, around teacher wellbeing and making sure teachers feel that they're not taking on other people's challenges in their lives, that they're not responsible for those families, but that they can embrace the differences, they can empathize with their situations. And I guess it's a challenge for teachers in understanding where the professional side of their role ends and where it becomes personal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, a challenge for a lot of teachers in terms of how much they get to know families and how much they are willing to actually ask families for information about their lives.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess in terms of providing support for teachers around their own wellbeing, is it things like coaching, helping them understand the boundaries, but helping them also to be more embracing of the family context and families who perhaps do things differently? The coaching and mentoring that supports them in those specific areas.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think, when we're doing teacher education coursework and so on, then we have a whole community of learners together. We're reading academic articles or practitioner articles as well. We're talking, we're debriefing. We often will have an elder or someone working with us. So when they're on their own in the school, then who is that support network? Do they have that identified? It might be a colleague, might be a school counselor, it might be their principal, a consultant in their, what we would call a school division, that kind of thing. And I think then too, it's knowing that that sympathy and empathy are different, right, as well, and that we can empathize and look for support. So again, one of the reasons you need to know your community is because you can say then to a parent, have you considered calling? Or do you know about Switch and the services they provide, etc., right? You don't own it and you don't take it away from them. You aren't a white savior rushing in, right? But you're saying to them, I've learned about this service. I could help you make that connection if you're interested. And again, I think not doing that for them or to them, but holding their hand, if you will, providing support to give them the opportunity to do that for themselves. And then we often talk about, our work isn't to rescue or to save, but within our curriculum, we can always be teaching toward equity. We can always be teaching toward diversity. We can always be teaching toward social justice. We can be talking about systemic issues that get in the way of some people doing as well as others in our curriculum. And so how do we take that on, right? And that's a piece we can do to change the world as we educate new generations of kids who are thoughtful about how people are positioned in the world and how, systemic things aid or get in the way. For us, it's learning about residential schooling and the intergenerational trauma and, some of those pieces to understand why families have lived in poverty for decades or generations, right? And they're not bad people making bad choices. It's just a structural issue that comes from the trauma of this other experience. So that's where we can be really helpful. And I think where teachers recognize places in their curriculum to be helpful, then that eases a sense that they can't be everything to everybody all of the time, right? And then they're doing what they train to do. They're doing what teachers are supposed to do, right?
Yeah. And it's a very unique profession in that, I guess in a lot of professions, relationship is at the heart of most professions, but this is unique in terms of the relationship that teachers need to have with their students, but also the relationship they need to have with parents to be able to support the child at the centre.
Mm-hmm.
My other question is around some of the examples that you've provided have been really interesting in how the teachers have actually embraced parent knowledge and using it in their teaching practice. And I wonder how the use of those strategies that they've used or those initiatives they've created. And by the way, it's actually a very amazing opportunity to be creative in how to integrate parent knowledge into the curriculum. How have they seen the impact on the student? Is it more around their well-being and their sense of belonging and their ability to, well, I guess, be happy in learning at school and in the home? Or is it, have they seen an impact on their academic learning as well?
Mm-hmm. I think they're seeing both for sure. Probably some of the social emotional, the comfort in the classroom, children's identity being celebrated and so on, probably brings some of those affective elements first of all. But I was rereading a piece today for something I was working on. Ryan Dignan is the teacher's name. He was teaching kindergarten at the time, and he said, I can't believe how much more my kids are doing this year, how much more they know because I've built these relationships with their families. And it's just so much easier to talk with parents, to problem solve. School learning's going home and being enriched and expanded. Home learning's coming back to school, and we're doing things with it here. And he said, when I look at the results with my kindergarten class last year and what they were able to do at the end of the year and my kids this year, he said, I can't believe the difference. And he said it wasn't my literacy or my numeracy, it was my relationships with my families and just how much knowledge we had to work with. His kindergarten kids were writing a blog during the year. They decided they'd write a blog to keep their families informed about things and share pictures of things they were creating and so on. And his kids in kindergarten, so 5 years of age, and maybe it doesn't compare with your curriculum, but often in kindergarten they can write their name, they can write a few words. His kids were writing paragraphs by the end of kindergarten.
Wow.
Just because of all the experiences they were having, how excited they were, and that continued learning and reinforcement back and forth. I mean, I think if you asked Brett too with the achievement with his book club, right, the kind of conversation and things that are happening, the greater engagement with that English novel, with the novel for their English class, just meant that the quality of the work, the extent of the work, all of those kinds of things happened and were increased. And I remember one dad saying at one point, I know my daughter's smart, right? She gets good marks. She's always got good marks. I've always been really proud of her. But he said, I didn't know her as a learner. I didn't know how she thought. I didn't know how she processed or problem solved, how she worked through an issue to figure out what her stance on something was going to be. And he said, I can see all of that now. So now think of how parents are promoting that and lifting that up. So it isn't just a teacher in a classroom in one class out of however many that girl's taking, but the family is now really conscious of problem-solving processes, thought processes, etc., that is going to permeate every aspect of her schooling and all of her subject matter, right?
Yeah, and a lot of parents would have had an insight into that during remote learning as well, where they were
Exactly.
able to see how their children learn and what their children were learning, and really gain another, well, I guess what you would term teacher knowledge of their child,
Yeah.
of how they are as a learner. And
Yeah.
once you give the parents those opportunities, as you said, they start to support that at home and encourage
Mhm.
it and nurture that.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
with the impact on teachers, how would you describe some of the teachers that you've mentioned? How would you describe how it's impacted them as a person and as a
Mhm.
teacher?
Yeah. It's so interesting because they say once you see it and once you're doing in it, you can't even remember who you were before you were doing it, right?
Like
Like
when you
that's
become a
how
parent.
yeah, exactly, right? They'll talk about it just becomes your normal, right? That everything you do with parents. You always ask parents to help co-plan. You always get their input. There's parents in your classroom, they're reading to kids, they're doing things with kids, and teachers say, how did I survive without this before, right? They just say, I can't imagine this not being the way I always thought or the way I always worked. So I mean, I think it's just so convincing. I guess the other thing is they're the teachers who are so passionate, who love their work, who are joyful. They're the teachers who feel supported and valued. They aren't the teachers who feel tired. They aren't the teachers who are stressed, right? And it was really interesting because in the research that was done with the parent-teacher home visit program specifically, the research showed that the teachers um, who did have these relationships with families, number one, they'd really interrupted a lot of bias and judgment, but they were teachers who liked their work more, um, who weren't on sick leave or stress leave to the same degree as other teachers, and who stayed in the profession longer as well. So in a time when we're feeling so much pressure with remote learning and teaching and COVID and isolation and everything that's coming, isn't it wonderful to know you have this group that value you, support you, are there for you all of the time? And I really haven't had a teacher say, oops, not doing this anymore, that didn't work out, right? They just, I mean, I keep hearing them say it's life-changing, right? And so I think if you're happier at work, you're just happier in life as well, and you take that home to your own family also. So yeah, I think I guess I often think about it in the sense of a worldview, because our Indigenous people have a worldview that's very different than our Eurocentric worldview. And it takes a long time to figure it out, to understand it. And the more I sit in sweat lodge or participate in ceremony, the more I'm starting to grasp it. And I think that's what happens for teachers. They have a worldview that's quite authoritarian, because of the system, not because of them as individuals. I'm the knower, I'm the decider. And they move to this place of walking alongside. And it's a different worldview. And I think they're convinced by the experience of it. Yeah.
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 And it's really, a lot of it is about letting go, isn't it? And really just trusting that it's going to be okay, and that it's all part of the learning of who you are as a teacher, who you are as a person,
Yeah.
and how you can best serve the students by
Yeah.
being in relationship with families. You
Yeah.
talk about the map making, living as
Mm,
map makers
yeah.
together in your research, and I love that concept and that vision or visual of map makers. How
Mhm.
would you describe how teachers can work alongside or walk alongside parents to create that map, or map out
Mhm.
that plan? Or is there a plan that
Mhm.
teachers work with parents on to support the child's learning?
Yeah. And different teachers are doing it in different ways. So I would say when Christy asks the child and family to write, if you're not from my family, in lots of ways, that's the beginning of that map. When teachers have families come in and create a strand for a family chandelier, showing what's important and who they are, that's that beginning map. When teachers do photo voice projects with their families, having their families put together a photo voice project of some kind, again, showing who they are in different aspects of themselves, that's the beginning of a map. I just saw on Twitter the other day too, something that was so sweet. Melissa McFarlane is one of the teachers with whom I've worked. And she used a book by Sarah Finelli, and I think it's just called a book of maps, I think is all that it's called. And so she was using it with her kindergarten children, and so she had them do a project that they created. So big, beautiful visuals, as you can imagine kindergarten do, and it was called A Map of My Heart. And they drew all the things that they love that are really important to them. But I thought, what a wonderful family project it would be to do a map of our family, or a map of our love, or a map of our heart as a family project. The notion, I've been doing this research on parent knowledge for a while, and I was struggling to find a way to talk about it, right? And I was reading a book by Anne Michaels, a novel. It was just leisure reading, called The Winter Vault. And in this story, the one character, Lucien, and another character, Jean, were talking. And Lucien would go out late at night, in the middle of the night when everyone was asleep, and he'd make maps of places. And he was talking to Jean about it and saying that everybody has their own map of a city. The way Rachel travels in her map to her grocery store, to her church, to her friends, to her coffee place, isn't going to be the way Debbie's map looks, right? And so in this passage in the novel, he was saying that everyone has a map of a city, and he said there's a mother's map. You know, where can you push your carriage without the road being too rough? Where's a washroom when you're playing at the park? What if you need to get your child a snack, and so on? And that was the moment for me when I thought that's what parent knowledge is. It's a parent's map of their child. So, you know, if I was teaching one of your kids, Rachel, think of your map of that child and all the things that would be in it because of your shared and lived experiences, your intimate relationship, and so on. And then how might I draw a map of that child very different than yours, right? Because I know them in a classroom, I know them in a group of 30, et cetera, et cetera. But when we bring those maps together, right? So, you know, I think there's lots of ways you could beautifully and visually map, or map through other types of projects too, like the artifact sharing, or like the Where I'm From poems, or like, you know, there's sort of multiple things that we do, and multiple things teachers are beginning to do as they get that idea. But how do we ask? And ways like, I see at the beginning of a school year often a survey goes home to parents with multiple questions. It's kind of overwhelming. It's quite clinical sometimes. And you don't get to tell your story, right? And so how do we give parents the opportunity to have that story come and that be the map, right?
Yeah. I had an idea that I shared with some teachers I was coaching a couple of years ago, of a bucket full of parent knowledge, and trying to get them to think of creative ways that they could gather or invite parents into the classroom at the start of the year to share some stories with the teacher, and how they would gather that information. whether it was a nice, beautiful basket that they could ask them to write a few things down on a piece
Yeah.
of paper, or just different ways to think of how to ask those questions or gather that knowledge that's not too invasive, or that is sensitive, that is not in a way that parents would feel they're being probed or
Yeah.
judged in any way.
Yeah.
So it's really about just thinking outside the box and being a little creative in how you actually gather that knowledge. And surveys really don't cut it. I mean, they give you a little bit of information, but they don't really dive deeper into the reasons behind the answers. And I guess it takes a little bit more relational skills and building rapport with parents that teachers need to be able to have those conversations and feel comfortable to have those conversations.
Yeah, and I think the more open-ended we can give, make things. So if English isn't my first language, if I'm not feeling like I'm really strongly literate, but I'm artistic, right? Or, like Brett does with his, you can sing it, you can draw it, you can dance it, you can write it, you can, how do we open up and having lots of materials available to parents for them to work with or use in a way that suits them, and how that will turn out could be quite different for each one of them, right?
Yeah.
But I think, by reading beautiful books like the map books, or talking about a map of love, or, a parent's map of a child, and so on, I think, I think we open up possibilities. I don't know very many parents who don't love telling stories about their kids.
I know. You just have to ask them about their children and they'll start talking.
Yeah, and so there you go. And and like you said earlier, Rachel, listen. Right?
Yes,
We just
absolutely.
have to be quiet and good listeners some of the time, and the knowledge is it's all around us if we just are open to hearing it.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
So when it comes to parents actually initiating their knowledge of their child with a teacher who's not necessarily used to having parents come with concerns or questions that they may not have the answers to, how do teachers overcome that feeling of needing to have the answers and needing to be the expert? How do they remove that sense of I'm the professional and I'm the expert, and I don't particularly like being questioned about my teaching practice?
Right.
How do we help teachers overcome that sense of perhaps threat or feeling that they're being questioned if a parent comes with a concern about their children's learning, for example, if it is their speech, or if they're having trouble, if they've noticed at home they're having trouble spelling or articulating something? How do we help teachers to overcome those feelings of wanting to have the answer and feeling anxious if they don't have the answers?
Oh, it's such a hard one. And I think, often I fault our teacher education systems that teachers graduate from university feeling like they do have to have all the answers. Why do we believe that, right? What is it that causes us to feel that way? So then, what work can we do as a staff, or in staff meetings and staff professional development, to really look at and talk about what does it mean to be a professional, and to unpack that. So in the work that I do in early childhood, we talk a lot about the image of a child, right? In my parent knowledge work, then I talk about the image of a parent. We don't as often get to the place of image of a teacher. And I think that would be amazing work for all staffs to do. Again, if we're proactive, we're not reacting when a parent says something to us, right? But what does that mean? What's your vision of yourself as a teacher? Who are you? What do you do? Why do you do it? Let's have those kinds of conversations ahead of time. So I might graduate believing I have to have all the answers. That's why I have a license. I wear my teacher suit to give you a sense that I know what I'm doing. I use my formal name, not my first name, to, again, distance you. So how do we talk about all of those things with our teachers really early in their career each year when we begin again to say, what does it mean? Ryan, the teacher that I was mentioning, had said, you know, it was an article that we were doing some research during the Curriculum of Parents work, and I had a taped conversation with him, and he said, I left university feeling like I needed to be a professional. And he said, what I learned is I needed to be in relationship. But he said it took me about 5 years to figure that out. And that's when his kids started doing so well. So how do we redefine what it means to be a professional? Is it authoritative? Is it all-knowing? Is it distant? Is it expert? Or is it relational? Is it reciprocal? Is it a listener and a learner as well as a talker and a leader, etc., right? And I don't think we explore teacher identity well enough. I don't think we talk enough about what it means to be a professional, or what even professional boundaries are, right? Because there's this professional boundaries, but what does that actually mean, right?
Yeah.
We have to deconstruct all of that, Rachel, I think.
Maybe that's a whole other module that we need to create.
I would love for you to do that. For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think professional learning for teachers in knowing themselves, as you said, and what sort of person am I when I'm a teacher, and who am I outside of teaching, outside of my job. And I guess everyone tends to put on some sort of persona when they're at work, when they're in work mode, in that identity, and then when they're at home, completely different or quite different. And I know some teachers I've worked with who work in country towns where a lot of parents would shop at the same supermarket, and they feel obliged to talk to parents in a way that they probably should be embracing them as families in the town, because they're, you know, the same townsfolk. But a lot of teachers shy away from that sort of thing because they want to keep their professional life separate from their personal life, and really make sure there is that boundary.
Yeah. And I just think that's a conversation that we need to have. I don't know about you. I have one life, Rachel, and I am always a mother. Any minute of any day, wherever I'm always a mother.
Yes.
And probably any minute of any day, wherever I am, I'm also a researcher, a teacher, whatever, right? Like, that lives in us. And I think we just have to honor that. I've always found that I'm healthiest when I'm not trying to separate my lives, right? If I'm trying to separate my life, I'm all worried, oh my gosh, I should be home for supper already. You know, I'm in the wrong place. But if I'm home and there's still work to do, then I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't get that paper finished today. I really should have done that. I'm in the wrong place. Like, I think we just need to bring our lives to, like, we talk about holistic learning and holistic development for our children, and then we try not to do it ourselves, right? Like, I think that, you know, we just need to relax about some of that. And again, I think those are historical definitions that maybe don't fit our 2020 life anymore. And so how do we visit them? This is just a cute little story. I think I was in my very first year of teaching, first or second anyway, and I had this wonderful little boy in my class. His name was Ricardo, but he liked to be called Rick. And we were having a family activity, and Lori and Rick were walking. Lori's my partner. Lori and Rick were walking to the staff room, excuse me, to get a dessert or something that was in the fridge. Rick, this cute little curly-haired boy, is walking with Lori. He reaches up to Lori. He shakes his hand. He says, "Sure, like your wife. She's a great gal." And so Lloyd goes, what the heck, you're a great gal. And he was like, it kind of started then, right? But I'm glad that's what he thought, right? I'm glad that's who I could be. And I think about, like I started my career literally, this is probably way too much information for everyone, but I started my career 40 years ago. And those are kids that I still talk to on Facebook, that I'm Facebook friends with, whose parents are Facebook friends with me. I had a student, I had on Messenger on Facebook, it was just a month or so ago, I had a woman send me a snapshot of a card that I had written to her. She wasn't even my student. She was the sister of one of my students, but she'd attended a family event, and I had written a thank you note to the family, handwritten, for being there. Juanita finds this in her things. We lived in Alberta at the time. She lives in Ontario. I think this thing was dated 1983. And she goes, look, I've got this card you wrote for me. And so what do you want in your life, right? And I just think the richness and the riches of those relationships have sustained us over 40 years. Like, there's got to be something great in that, right? Yep. You've heard me talk about kids that I taught who are doing well, and I think it works. My lived experience says this stuff's important, and the more we know the families of our children and the parents, the more we use what parents know, the better we're going to educate the children, and the healthier and happier we're all going to be. I just think it's such a win for everybody.
It is, and what a beautiful way to finish our session today. It's really is about not being afraid to be yourself in the classroom and with families, and really just being who you are. And I guess that has been how you've actually made those relationships, because you value relationships in your teaching and in your practice, and with everybody you meet. you're the same with everyone you meet. And that's very admirable, because I think we do tend to try and be people that we're not supposed to, or who we think we're supposed to be, to fit a certain mold or fit a certain identity. So I think a lot of the examples that you've shared of what teachers can be doing and how they can actually engage parents in understanding parent knowledge of their child, all of those things that you shared today have been so rich, and I think that teachers will be able to learn so much from those examples, but also to feel confident and free to create their own maps of the children and how they actually relate to families. So I just want to thank you so much for being here today, because it's been beautiful to hear those stories, and I can just see so many opportunities for teachers to feel more confident to build those relationships, which ultimately leads to trust with parents. So thank you, Debbie.
You're so welcome, and thanks for the chance to have this conversation. I feel so honored that you value the work and see possibility with it. So it's just wonderful.
I feel like it's really timely at the moment to be able to share this with teachers and help them know that parents have so much knowledge to share now that they've had such an insight into their children's learning at home. And also to help parents understand, like we're going to be doing next week in the webinar, how important it is to share, to be open to sharing their knowledge with teachers about their children.
And not to be discouraged, because they are going to come across teachers who shut them down, shut them out. And, it's just being resilient in the face of some of that, isn't it? When we know it's good for our kids, then, how else do we do it, right? To make sure that what we know is heard and acted upon and so on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're both on a mission to change the world.
The world.
Hopefully this will get out to as many teachers as we can, And
Yeah, good. Thank
and
you.
yeah, so hopefully it'll bring some more joy to your life as well by being a part of this as well.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And I hope I gave you things that you can use. I hope they were concrete enough.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
We've got plenty to work on. And I just, as you were talking, I can see some activities that I can give them to just reinforce what you said in
Mm-hmm.
the recording as well. So I'll share
Yes.
those with you before I
Yeah.
launch the course.
Well, and for sure, things that you figure out, I can piggyback on too. So, like all these ideas, we just share them amongst ourselves, and
Yeah.
ideas grow in all these interesting ways because people interpret them differently, do different things with them, and so on. So, yeah, you just never know what can happen. So it's so
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm actually going to, I've created a formula, and parent knowledge is part of the formula. And I'm starting with perceptions and exploring perceptions of parents, and that sort of feeds into, that the value system of teachers, and when values rub up against them and how they deal with that. And also building rapport is the next one, where just helping teachers understand how easy and simple it is to actually have a conversation with parents.
Yeah.
Just really simple ways to introduce them to the relationship. And I'm going to be exploring communication. Obviously, that's a huge area, different ways of communicating,
Nice.
tonality, all of those sorts of things, tone of voice, body language, all sorts of ways that we communicate.
Mr. and Mrs. kind of stuff too. I don't know if it's required in your schools, but even that gets in the way, just what we call ourselves, how we sign pieces of paper, am I Mrs. Cushel or just Debbie, right? And
titles and signage around schools and those sorts of things.
Huge,
yeah.
Huge, yeah.
And I've asked Linda McNeil to come and talk with me about engaging in dialogue and how to have those conversations. Well, ultimately we want to be able to teach teachers that conversations don't need to be difficult, but sometimes obviously they have to have challenging conversations with parents, and how do we manage those as well?
Yeah, it's so important. And I think if people could just feel comfortable being open and vulnerable, right? I don't know how many times I use those words: be open, be honest, be vulnerable.
Yes.
Everything else kind of, let's just be real with each other and figure it out and say, I don't know what to do, right?
Let's just remember that we're all human and nobody's perfect.
Exactly. Yeah. And teachers do get hurt, just like parents do get hurt sometimes. And, it's like a marriage, right? Does that end the marriage, or do you work through it and keep moving forward, right? There's no relationship in life that's easy. And, we can't be giving up too easily either. So, because everyone has a story. Well, there was a parent who, it's like that was one parent, so it doesn't mean it's going to happen again, right? Teaching, right? It's just like you can't let that one bad experience taint everything, right?
Yeah. There was a lesson to be learned in that bad experience anyway.
Take it and then move on. Exactly. Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for your time today.
So tomorrow before my 5:30 time, I will get you PowerPoint for, is that Wednesday?
Ralph?
Tuesday? For Ralph.
Yes. Yeah.
And do you want me to email it directly to him as well?
Do you have his email?
I don't know if I took it down. That's why I was wondering, should I just send it to you?
Yeah, if you just send it to me and then I'll forward it to him.
It's okay.
He's supposed to be sending me a link for you for tomorrow. Unless it's the same as last time. I can't remember if he has told me it's the same. I've had so many different things going on.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Now, the other thing too with tomorrow is Rod, our chair from CSPB, is going to join us for a
Sure.
test.
Nice.
Because we thought with Anne's webinar last weekend, we
Oh,
had
yeah. I
two,
wanted to ask you.
we had two parents come on and ask a question or answer one of Anne's questions. And I wondered how you felt about Rod coming on during the presentation to either answer a question or ask you a question. It seemed to work well.
Nice. Because that's a bit what you were practicing with Jody and with Jill,
yes.
right?
Yep.
And so that worked.
Yeah, it worked really well. Yeah.
That seems like quite a strong platform. I haven't used that one before. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, the only thing we can't do is have breakout rooms with it. So if we want to do that, we have to have Zoom or use Zoom webinar.
Yeah.
So, but I think we're just getting used to webinars at the moment. So we're just trying to start off slow.
So much.
Just to learn how to do it properly first.
You have a bigger group to try and manage it for sure.
Yeah.
So Anne's went well. That was good.
It did. We had a bit of a hiccup because we got the times wrong at the start. So I had
Is that because of her time change?
No, it was our time change because we tipped over to daylight savings. So it was my mistake. I completely forgot about daylight savings. So I want to make sure we get your time right.
Right. So we did well today because you told me now you're 17 hours, correct?
Yes. Yep. So I checked it on Time Converter and it was correct.
I keep checking it too because I keep thinking I'll show up wrong and then what, right?
Yeah. So when I sent the Google invitation, did that come through on your calendar at 5:30 on your calendar? Right. So that's what I'll do. I'll send you the link on Google.
Yeah.
So that way it's in.
Perfect. Yeah. Because I think it will be 2 a.m. So we'll want to come in about 1:30 a.m. So
just to do that test run. Yeah.
So just want to be sure my time's all right.
I'm really sorry that it's in the middle of the night. It's just,
That's all right. It's not life-threatening. So, John Stafford was in touch and wants me to help with a video launch. And I think it's going to be at about 11 p.m. because they're doing it in the afternoon. So, the times just always, they are what they are, right? What can you do? So,
and it's just a one-off anyway. So
I told John I'd be wearing pajamas to yours next week.
I think he was on the webinar last week with Anne.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good.
So he might be on yours as well.
Yeah, he might be. Then he'll be checking to see if I'm wearing pajamas.
Yeah, John is he's amazing, the work that he's done. I think he needs to come out into the spotlight a bit more.
Oh, he isn't going to, is he?
No, he's not, but he needs to.
Humble. He's so humble that way.
I think he does because he's one of the leading experts in this space in Australia, and there are not many. So I think he has a lot to share.
He thinks very deeply, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. I need to catch up with him soon just to have a conversation and talk about what we can do.
Nice. And Jill's university just asked if I would be her external examiner.
All right. Fantastic.
Yeah, so I can't remember the date. I'm 1 week at a time, but it's not a while, but it'll give me a wonderful opportunity to be able to read her work as well, which would be beautiful.
Yeah, Jill's great.
Yeah, so that was a nice opportunity. So
So there's lots of little pockets of people doing different things, and most of us are pretty humble actually. Pretty quiet.
True. Yeah.
Quietly behind the scenes, but I think it's time that we came out from behind the curtain and made sure people hear the messages now, especially.
Yeah.
So
I think so, especially now the timing is really good for it. I think.
Definitely.
Yeah. Lots of work to be done. I would say the same here. It's still pockets. We aren't systematic yet, right? I continue to work towards that, but I don't know if I'm going to see it in my lifetime, Rachel, or not. It's hard to make those changes in those structures, right? Whether it's your ministry or your diocese or your Catholic schools or whatever. It just, I don't know. It's
huge cultural shifts.
Huge. Yeah. Hard work, but
yeah.
There's more
but worthwhile.
All worthwhile. All worthwhile. Exactly.
All right. Well, I'll let you go so you can enjoy your evening.
I'll shoot you that PowerPoint tomorrow. I bet I wanted to have this conversation with you too, because I thought that would help me think about some things and shape it also. So I want to do a little bit more tinkering and polishing with it, and then I'll get it off to you. So.
All right. No problem.
Well, thank you for a wonderful conversation. It's always lovely. You give me lots to think about. So that's
Thank you. Yeah. And I'll see you tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Tomorrow evening for you.
Yes. Sounds great. Thanks, Rachel.
Bye. Bye-bye.